Welcome back to the main segment this week of Gossip Without Prejudice. So last week, if you recall, a bunch of national security advisors, among other senior administration officials at the Trump administration, basically brought the Atlantic's editor-in-chief into a Signal group chat. And rather than doing an investigative story this week, we're just going to sit down and talk about this because this is absolutely bonkers.
Mm-hmm.
I'll leave it to Lindsey to fill in the details, but we're absolutely stopping the train to talk about this because we have so many thoughts. Lindsey, how are you doing this week?
I'm so pumped up to talk about this story. This is absolutely bonkersville. Just the craziest shit you can imagine. As my dad described it, a Russian nesting doll of incompetence.
So give us the full story, Lindsey.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
walk us through it.
The rundown. This all started around March 13th, Thursday. The editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, his name is Jeffrey Goldberg, he was added to a group chat called Houthi PC Small Group was the name of this group chat in Signal. And so he was added on Thursday. And then a couple days, there was a little bit of activity, but it wasn't until Saturday morning when things really started going down in the chat. At first, Goldberg had no clue whether or not to presume that this was real or fake. But then on Saturday morning, when things started to get real, he realized, oh my God, this is a real chat. This is actually happening. So Saturday morning, the chat starts blowing up with messages about planning war efforts, planning a bombing that same afternoon. And this was not public knowledge. That's key. This was not public knowledge. And so I can't fucking believe it, man. They're in the chat talking about how they're going to bomb this city in Yemen. And they had inadvertently and unknowingly added an extremely important journalist into this chat. And he was just a fly on the wall, just observing all of this deeply important national security information while they congratulated themselves with emojis. And he very shortly after the bombing happened, he realized fully and completely, oh shit, this was real. And he took all his screenshots and then he left the chat. Mm-hmm. And then that story broke on March 24th. And so today we are going to cover the first 5 days of Signalgate and everything that has happened here and why it is so absurdly stupid.
So a couple of things here. I think we'll just I think the best way to handle this is sort of just start talking about it and we'll see how it goes. Because what I am most struck by is first, I want to absolutely highlight the Atlantic's restraint. They waited 10 calendar days to publish this.
9?
Something like
9
they
calendar
waited
days.
more than a week to publish this story.
Yeah.
And what that meant was by the time they disclosed all this information publicly, it was stale.
Yes.
Right? And if they had gotten this on a Saturday, put the story together on a Sunday and then published on Monday, it's possible that American personnel, wherever they may be, would have been injured because the information was recent enough for our enemies overseas to act on it.
Yes.
And so I really want to first and foremost give props to the Atlantic's editing team. This was handled as responsibly as it could be.
Yes, it really was.
Yeah.
They did a fantastic job.
Yeah, and second thing, it's just absolutely crazy that this nightmare blunt rotation of a group chat that you would just get a Signal invite on a random Friday or whatever, and then accept it and then all of a sudden be in a virtual room with all of our most sensitive and senior officers in the United States. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard, Marco Rubio.
I've got the whole list.
Read us out the list again.
All right. So I've got the list followed by title. So main suspect of intrigue here is Michael Waltz, the National Security Advisor. And then we've also got Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State. We've got J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States of America, Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence.
Amazingly.
Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary. Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense. A lot of the backlash here is focused on Hegseth, so we'll talk about him more. John Ratcliffe, the Director of the CIA. Stephen Witkoff, Middle East and Ukraine negotiator. Susie Wiles, White House Chief of Staff. And finally, Joe Kent, who Trump nominated a while back to lead the National Counterterrorism Center. I want to add real quick, some of these people are speculated based on initials. We don't have a full name for everyone. every single one of these people, but based on belief and information and
Yeah.
current understanding, those are the people that are involved in this.
Okay. Also, good use of belief and information. That was
Thank
very
you.
good. I caught
picked that up from last
Yeah, I
time.
picked that up. Rippling v. Deal. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
I think so part of the reason I suspect why he left is that there's a law called the Espionage, the 1917 Espionage Act.
Very important.
Retention and dissemination per the 65th Congress of the United States. Retention or dissemination of information that you're not authorized to have is a crime on various levels, but it's basically a big no-no. Even if just having them. Just like having these messages in itself could criminalize him if he did not step out. I think he left the group chat. Like people are all over social media are saying like, oh, I would have stayed in that group chat forever.
No.
I would not have.
Yeah.
He got enough information to know the story was credible, and then he left.
I think that's really wise.
Yeah, especially with this administration has proven very willing to weaponize the Department of Justice to come after its perceived enemies. And you saw that in the ad hominem, like personal attacks, Pete Hegseth getting in front of reporters and being like, "This Atlantic reporter is a hoax wielding."
They were attacking Goldberg immediately after this story.
Well, it's part of
mind blowing to me.
Well, actually, it makes perfect sense because
it does.
Authoritarian regimes they need to. Trump's playbook is claim victory and attack and never apologize. But you saw actually a really disjointed response across the administration.
Yeah,
Administration confirmed it, and then Hegseth went on the offensive, and then Trump talked about Greenland. That's a dead cat. So what the Trump administration does is they stir controversy to redirect attention from their massive fuck-ups. And so you'll always see Trump make his most inflammatory or confusing comments right in the wake of bad press that's of something he did. So Hegseth going on the offensive to save his own skin doesn't surprise me. Seeing Trump make inflammatory remarks about Greenland, Panama, or whatever is in the news this week also doesn't surprise me. Preserve your outrage for the stuff that really matters. And what matters here is that our secrets are basically on a commercially available app. So do not let the backwards hat confuse you. I actually worked for the State Department for a short time. In my younger years, I worked in the Tri-Mission Embassy with the U.S. Consulate in Italy, in Rome.
Wow.
And I had secret security clearance as part of this process. It has since long expired, thank God, now that I work in private practice.
Thank God. You're glad that you don't have that security clearance anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So there's something called a Sensitive Compartmented Information Facility, or SCIF. And so what those are is basically government-approved black sites where the various officials gather to discuss sensitive information. I say black sites, but blackout in the sense that they take your phone. They're protected from signal monitoring. They're run by government agents to ensure OPSEC. And so that's all the pictures of Obama in the ready room taking out Osama bin Laden. That was in a SCIF, right? And there have been various pictures in SCIFs before. It is absolute. If I had discussed the documents and information I was privy to when I worked for the federal government in the way that these people did, if I was talking about it on a Signal chat, which is encrypted, but it is not nearly adequate enough for the use that they were using it for.
Absolutely.
And I think we'll get to why they were using it. And I think you and I are going to talk about that in a little bit. But I would be in jail. Right, I would be in jail for
a heartbeat.
In a minimum of 5 to 10 years. We had agents, the consulate and the embassy. So I worked under Ambassador Eisenberg. Newt Gingrich was actually also there because Ambassador Gingrich, his wife, I was in the party that received them during the first Trump administration to oversee the handoff of various. Anyways, the Tri-Mission Embassy is one of the largest embassy complexes because it's actually the mission to 3 separate state entities, one of which is Italy, and the other of which is the Holy See. So I got to see the Pope too. Story for another time.
Okay.
All these important people, we went into a room. We were searched, we were scanned, we had all of our electronics taken, even watches.
Wow.
They take this very seriously, and I think part of why it's so outrageous that this has happened is that every federal employee I know, my colleagues, many of which were at USAID, who have now all lost their jobs. There was a USAID office as part of among many other departments in every embassy and consulate to coordinate local affairs. We're kind of rules don't matter if the people at the top don't have to follow them.
Yes.
Right? This country, the fundamental problem is that the higher up the pyramid you get, the less accountable you are. And it should be the opposite. At the bottom, you should be not at all accountable, generally speaking. And then as you go up the top, you should get more money, but
to have ultimate
Yeah,
consequences.
you should have ultimate consequences, and it should be much easier to fall.
Yes.
Right? And so,
yes.
but it's the opposite. And I think a
Mhm.
lot of people are basically fundamentally upset about that.
Yeah, that's what's really boiling my blood about this one. It's the lack of accountability combined with the blatant lying of those involved. That's
Yes.
what really gets to me. I want to talk about what Signal is as a little bit.
Good,
Just
good idea.
for anyone who isn't familiar with it, I personally have been using Signal for literally years just because it's a great app. There's a couple things I want to mention off the bat. Signal is a nonprofit. So that is a nonprofit organization.
Mhm.
The entire code that the app functions on, the entire code is open sourced. So this code is out there. If you're concerned about Signal's security, you can go read the code yourself.
Oh my
which
God.
is something that I personally love, and it's been
Okay.
that way for a long time. I believe it's been that
Open
way for a while.
source?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Mhm,
very
mhm.
cool. I did not know that.
Isn't it? So the messages themselves sending through Signal are encrypted, which makes them more secure than, say, like WhatsApp or texting. However, they are significantly less secure than any skiff that a federal employee might use, because it's just on your phone and it can just be opened, easy as that. And so a lot of people have been trying to put flack on Signal for being, oh, well, it's not their fault they use Signal. It's Signal's fault for being insecure. That is a complete bullshit argument. Because Signal is commercial. It is made for commercial use for regular old people to have on their regular old phones. So that's my little rant about it's not Signal's fault.
It's interesting reading through the text messages during I'm trying to look for screenshots because they mentioned like high rise. I forget what it was called.
Yeah, the screenshots are a little bit hard to find anywhere other than
The
the
Atlantic
article.
They mentioned the secure, it's like high something, I forget, but that's their secure communication system.
Mhm.
But it's much harder to use, like because it's more secure. There's authentications.
Yeah.
It's less user friendly
For-
because with security comes a lack of access, and so. But the reason I think the Trump administration is using Signal
Mhm.
is because you can set the messages to auto delete.
That's key.
You can set the messages to auto delete, and so what they're discussing was it 1 week.
Some were 1 and some were 4.
Okay. Between 4 and 7 days, the messages are gone permanently. And this
Yes.
matters is that for those of you at home, there's something called the Freedom of Information Act at the federal level, FOIA. And it basically makes sure that everything the government does, if it is not classified, is ultimately freely accessible to you, the American public.
Mhm.
And so you can put in a FOIA request to various department agencies and say, give us all your emails, all your emails that you've sent, or the records or whatever you want. You can just get it from the government if it's not classified, and the federal government has to comply,
Mhm.
unless
the messages are set to disappear within a month.
or if they're on like a third party platform that the government doesn't control.
Mm.
And that's I think, in my opinion, that's because I don't care if we bomb Houthi rebels. I hope the pilots that did those things are safe.
And I hope no innocents died.
I hope no. I mean, they probably did.
They probably
Let's
did.
be honest.
Last 53 people died in this particular bombing.
All right. Well, in the long arc of history, I can't stop the federal government from killing more people.
Yeah, that's
but
for sure.
I think the fight I want to die on is making sure that we at least know what the government is doing so that we can stop it from doing stuff like that in the future. Right? And so I would not care if this attack had been spoiled. But I do very much care that now we won't know what anyone was talking about. And the great irony here is because the Atlantic waited 7 to 9 days or whatever it was to publish this, there's no record of this, right? Tulsi Gabbard, the fact that he got screenshots, that is the only proof this ever happened.
Yeah.
And that's why Tulsi Gabbard could get on in front of the National Security Advisory Committee in the Senate or in the House or whatever and be like, nothing was even shared. We didn't even share any information. And then the Atlantic was like, okay, I'll call your bluff. And they published the whole thing. And then Tulsi Gabbard got called back in front of the committee and had to go up in front of everyone and be like, I misremembered. And that's what's crazy. This was only like a week ago,
Yeah.
and it's already theoretical.
Yeah,
it's already intangible.
And it's already playing out. So that's key. I wanted to mention something.
Yeah.
Originally on the 24th, when the story broke, Jeffrey Goldberg published select screenshots that illustrated these were the people involved. This was the type of conversation. But Goldberg did not release the specific screenshots where they're discussing the bombing and the war plans are what they're being called.
Well, it's basically just one weird trick. right?
Yeah.
They're trying to one weird trick their way out of the Records Act.
Yeah.
And the truth is they're going to get away with it because even if
Oh.
this is technically illegal, it breaks a bunch of laws,
Yeah.
but Trump will just come in and pardon them.
Yeah.
They're federal
Ooh.
laws. There's nothing
Wah.
that stops him from pardoning them in the long arc of history. If they face consequences at all, they won't.
My hope is that the case behind this, the lawsuit, drags out for the next 4 years so that by the time these people finally get consequences, there's a new president who isn't going to pardon them.
Maybe.
But that's not, that's nothing we can rely on.
Yeah, that's nothing we can rely on, and the damage is done.
Yeah, the damage is done. The damage is done. So it was originally Goldberg put out the chat and that it existed. And then not everyone, a few select people involved said, no, there weren't any war plans going on in that chat. We didn't do anything illegal. And then after they lied for a couple of days, then Goldberg came out and released the rest of the chat. So that's what we have now. We have the full screenshots and we have the war plans communication.
Yep.
And so what really gets me was the fact that they thought they could get away with lying on the very first point when it's the easiest bluff to call.
Well,
because he already has all the screenshots there just ready to drop.
Well, because they don't need to convince the public they're right. They just need to convince the public during the first 4 days that the story drops that there's nothing to see here. So, like, if half the country stops watching after Tulsi Gabbard gets up and says, nothing to see.
Not a big deal. And Trump said not a big deal, too.
And also Trump stood behind it. Then they've won.
Yeah.
Right? It's because 99% of the public isn't going to circle back and check next week.
Right.
So I understand why they did not publish the full group chat because, there's tremendous unpredictability in how the Department of Justice would respond to The Atlantic publishing this. They've been attacking The Atlantic since 2020 when this editor was the one that published Trump's statements about dead U.S. service members being suckers and losers. That was The Atlantic. So Trump has been out for these guys for a long time. If I were more reckless and I were in the editor's shoes, I would have published everything right away. But that would have also put us in the line of fire, right?
Yeah,
so I understand why the editors did this. It just lessens its impact notably. And it's so interesting. I've been reflecting on comments that like Ezra Klein, a pretty famous New York Times political commentator and reporter, he said that like it's actually so incredibly risky what Trump has done. He has filled his administration with loyalists and then forced, with the help of Elon Musk, who will just drop $50 million on a primary for anyone who opposes Trump on a major vote, which is nothing to him but lethal to all these people in their home districts.
Yeah, all the other 99%.
Yeah, exactly. It's tremendous political risk to get to have RFK Jr. running the CDC and the Department of Health, or to have Pete Hegseth running the DOD because he's completely unqualified. I mean, yeah, he was in like the National Guard or something, but it's a department of like 3 million people overseeing our national security and defense, something a Fox News host is not objectively unqualified for, to speak nothing of his policies. He did not need to take that risk. He could have gotten like some run-of-the-mill establishment guy that Congress was much more comfortable to vote on, and that would have prevented the obvious problem is that if something goes wrong, if there's a measles outbreak, if there's a terrorist attack, if national security secrets leak when Tulsi Gabbard is at the helm.
For example.
Yes, exactly. Everyone is now primed to blame those people. But Trump is taking that risk because this is why we talked about fascism in our first episode this season, is that Trump needs loyalists and the need for loyalists outweighs the need for political subtlety. Right?
Yeah.
And so he's now actually loading up a ton of loyalists that may be his downfall, or at least will make it harder to transition to a successor, which is really what's going to happen. People with this movement is so centered on Trump that it's going to be, even if carefully handled years in advance, it's going to fracture as it stands now. It's going to fracture when the torch is attempted to be handed to a successor. Like Mike Pence, is completely out of the picture now. They did not get along.
Because he, quote unquote, failed for the election overturning. I don't know any of the details, but January 6th.
January 6th, there was his refusal to certify fake electors, as he should have. Pence did the right thing.
Good.
But most importantly, Pence was an attempt by the Republican establishment to curb Trump's worst impulses. And he was also sort of a vote for the evangelical wing, right? Because he was like the man of principle. But since then, Trump and his allies have realized realize they don't need to pay lip service to that, and they've just dispensed with anyone like him.
Yeah.
And so now they have things running in a far more focused and lethal way. But I'm actually pretty comfortable this administration is not going to be known for anything because ultimately they're not building anything, right? They're coming in and they're destroying things.
That's for sure.
And they're trying to break the federal government such that it is easy to control. And then they haven't really articulated a specific policy beyond that. Like once they're done leveling the city, I don't know what they're going to build. I don't know what they can build.
Yeah.
Because ultimately you need Congress's cooperation. And the reason they haven't pushed any of this stuff through Congress is because they simply don't have the votes.
Yeah. Wow. Very well put. And
Well,
I wanted to make a connection there on the successor. This movement is so focused on Trump. You know, you could argue that maybe J.D. Vance would be a next successor, but he has his whole own reputation.
he has his own reputation.
And there's people who look at him and say that he's not loyal enough.
Well, he's not charismatic.
That's a problem for sure.
Because people are like...
Neither is Trump, but I guess...
I actually think Trump is charismatic.
That one really hurts my brain because I know exactly what you mean. There's a lot of people who see him as charismatic, but to me, he's just a disgusting little
if you don't...
cheeseball.
If you don't... I mean, that's true. He is. But like, there's different types of charisma, right?
Yeah.
It's not a clean, healthy sort of charisma. It's more of like a raw magnetism, but it is just charisma nonetheless. And Trump has a lot of it in this attention economy. I want to credit him for that.
That's true.
J.D. Vance does not.
That's
right?
true.
Even I know MAGA people in my orbit, in the edges of my orbit at least, that they love Trump. I haven't met a single one of them that has like, other than the fact that he is in Trump's camp, I have not met a single one that likes J.D. Vance with the same enthusiasm.
Yeah, no, it's just not out there.
It's not out there. And if I were the Republican National Committee, I would be very worried about because they're putting all their eggs in one basket. The only reason it keeps working is because the fucking Democrats, and I say this as a mostly historic, I vote independent and Democrat, at least at the local level. I've tended to vote more against Trump than for any of the candidates, that the federal Democrats have put up in recent years. The Democrats do not have a unified message in response.
Yes.
And so that eggs in one basket, doubling and tripling down right now has been working, right? We can't even decide whether or not to sanction Al Green when he stands up during the State of the Union address and holds up a cane and 10 Democrats vote to censure him.
Yeah.
I'm like, what are we doing?
Mixed messages all over the place.
Well, I mean, at the same time, we get all those desperate campaign emails and text messages like end of democracy. And then we see Obama and, Democratic figureheads laughing with, Trump appointees at his State of the Union a couple months ago. And it completely...
That was weird.
It was weird because it's like we're talking out of both ends of our mouth here.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And everybody was like, well, if it's really the end of democracy, why are you...
just sitting and chatting?
Why are we just sitting and chatting and holding up little pathetic signs and wearing pink hats? It's a really rudderless position to be in.
But I believe, I could absolutely be wrong, I believe that the American public is not going to let this case go. I think that this is really going to be a problem moving forwards. Something that, again, another particular aspect of this case that boils my blood is the hypocrisy of record keeping. But hey, remember that whole thing when Hillary Clinton was emailing from a private server and Trump threw a massive hullabaloo about it? And now what's happening here is, I believe, objectively worse, and he's trying to sweep it under the rug. And that direct hypocrisy really bothers me. And so I really think that that's bothering people more than just me. And I think that people aren't really going to let this one slide.
I think that the emails thing was never in my opinion. I mean, it was serious.
It's an issue for sure.
And it should be addressed.
But
it was never a good faith complaint.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't really bother me because it was never a good faith complaint. It was more used by the disinformation campaign to drum up suspicion of the system.
What else is she emailing on her private servers? Well, what else are they talking about on Signal and then disappearing 2 weeks later?
Yep, exactly. And they made a big show of Bleach Bit or whatever that purging program was. That in itself was problematic in its optics, but it's actually standard practice to purge hardware down to the firmware level when disposing of sensitive data storage. Anyways, we're getting off track here.
Yeah.
This is actually what I was talking about when we were talking about tremendous risk on his loyalists, because he brought in all these loyalists and they immediately shit the bed, like 12 weeks into his administration, and now because in an autocracy, there's only one person to blame. And ultimately, they're so close to Trump that Trump's circle is taking an enormous amount of heat for this.
Yeah, an enormous amount.
I would be surprised, though, if anyone actually resigns or gets fired over this. At least anyone important. And maybe they'll pick a scapegoat and send him out to pasture.
Maybe they'll pick one of Mike Waltz's employees or something like that.
Ultimately, the appearance of strength, because their strength is brittle, the appearance of strength is more important to them than literally anything. And so that's why whenever MAGA comes across a controversy, Brett Kavanaugh, who when he was accused of sexual assault, they had a list of like 80 people from the Federalist Society. They could have picked anyone off that list and just thrown him to the curb, but they stood by his nomination. And that's because the appearance of strength is more important than actual strength.
Yes.
And so backing down itself is a failure. And that's why I don't think I think they're going to just ignore this. I think it's going to do tremendous damage for their chances in the 2026 midterms.
But it has done an incredible job at showing how fragile their strength actually is, I think.
This has actually made a surprising impact.
Yeah. I saw some report. I don't have any figures behind this, but I saw a report that said a strong majority of Americans across all demographics think that this is a big issue.
Yep.
A bigger issue than Clinton's email servers.
And it's and I'm frustrated that like this is the big deal, but like Trump's pump and dump crypto coin at the start of his campaign or at the start of his term. So he founded a crypto coin and then rug pulled it. He and Melania.
Yeah, that's right. They had their own individual coins,
yes,
right?
they still have their crypto coins. And to me, that's the most egregious conflict of interest, because now a foreign government can come along and say, hey, Trump, we will pump, the like Russian oligarchs or whoever could come along and be like, hey, we will dump $9 billion into your crypto coin, raise the price. Now, by the way, if you can go talk to Ukraine and help us out with negotiations, that would be awesome. We're just trying to boost our currency here.
Oh, man.
And that has sort of completely fallen off the zeitgeist. It sort of, he launched this campaign, this coin to enrich himself, rug pulled it, and no one cared. And so he still has the coin, actually. It's still fluctuating. And so it's so interesting to me when like we had like the Jimmy Carter's peanut farm.
Yeah.
If you're familiar, like Jimmy Carter had to sell a peanut farm and put it in a trust before he can assume the presidency, because the norms were so strong back in the 60s. And now Trump retains control over all of his businesses. Like at least when the Saudis rented out a floor of Trump Tower to stay in his hotels or wherever. At least there was a record of that.
Yeah.
But with the crypto market, you can find ways to funnel money into crypto coins completely anonymously on the global scale.
Ooh,
and so the
scary.
problem has only amplified.
Yeah. Wow. I really hadn't thought about that at all. I wonder if that's because crypto rug pulls have been kind of demystified by this point, by the time that Trump got into it. They were so common.
Haley Welsh, also known as Hawk Tuah,
yes.
She has not been heard of, by the way.
She's just disappeared?
Since that rug pull, she's just disappeared and has not been seen in the public sphere since. So just wanted to catch you up on that, on that episode on our, yeah, exactly.
Oh my gosh. Well, so I want to get a little bit into what's going to happen next. What's the legal fallout for all of this? You believe that no one's really going to get in any trouble. No one's going to get fired for this. I am happy to report there is already a lawsuit on the books over this.
Okay.
So the lawsuit was filed 3/25, the day after the story broke.
Ooh.
So this is fresh. And fun fact, Judge Boasberg is presiding. The same judge who's in charge of the Venezuelan migrants
So
cases.
federal judges are randomly assigned cases.
So this is coincidence.
Coincidence.
But it's still cool.
Yeah, very cool.
Makes me happy to see.
Yeah.
So the lawsuit is from the nonprofit American Oversight.
All right.
The interim executive director, a person named Chioma Chukwu, says,
that's an awesome name.
isn't it?
Sick.
War planning doesn't belong in emoji-laden disappearing group chats.
Fist bump,
Yeah.
American flag fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this is beautifully said. War planning does not belong in emoji-laden disappearing group chats. It belongs in secure facilities designed to safeguard national interests, something any responsible government official should have known. So that's what this lawsuit focuses on. It's specifically filed against a few people, specifically about the disappearing messages part of Signal.
Yep.
That was the easiest for someone to grab onto here for the breaking of rules, because that's against the federal records keeping laws, as we all know. So count 1 was specifically for the disappearing messages, and that's against Hegseth, Gabbard, Ratcliffe, Besant, and Rubio.
Yep.
And then count 2 is against Rubio and NARA, the National Association of Records and Archiving. So because they knowingly allowed messages to be set as disappearing. So Marco Rubio is the archivist in chief or whatever, as the Secretary of the State. And so as the archivist, he should have seen, oh, these are set to disappear. That's illegal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So there's a count for setting disappearing messages, and then there's another count for knowingly not doing anything about that.
What's the relief they're requesting? Do we know that?
I do not know the relief. I should have pulled that lawsuit up, but I didn't think about it.
I'm guessing they're just asking for an injunction of some kind.
Yeah.
But in order to sue, you need to have standing.
And you need to have a prayer for relief, what you're asking for.
Oh, well, prayer for relief is different. That's what you're asking for. Standing just means you are somehow involved and impacted by. So,
Okay.
I mean, my guess is that they want these messages, and this is some sort of FOIA lawsuit. I'd have to look at it.
I believe it was that they wanted the messages released. I
Yeah,
think that was
okay.
their ultimate goal.
That's
the documentation.
Yeah, that's probably it. You name the departments or the individuals responsible.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the government's be able to produce these because they've been deleted.
Ah.
So when that happens, I think this is going to be very interesting. It's going
Yeah.
to be a test of an executive versus judicial power. I'm glad Bosberg is overseeing it.
Yeah. Because I think he's not going to take any bullshit.
He.
I think. I hope.
Yeah. Who knows? I think the judiciary is really hesitant to pick this fight because they ultimately know that they have no enforcement power. If the executive branch ignores them, the judiciary is basically fucked. They do have, I think we've talked about this before, they have the U.S. Marshals, but the U.S. Marshals are a wing of the Department of Justice. And the Department of Justice answers to Pam Bondi, excuse me, there we go, Pam Bondi, and Pam Bondi listens to Trump.
Yeah, and I believe she said, I read this morning, that she specifically said yesterday that she was not particularly interested in pursuing an investigation.
Yes, not particularly. They actually said that Musk was heading up the investigation.
There was someone in this circle went to Musk and was like, "Hey, can you help us figure out how Jeffrey Goldberg got into our chat?" And Musk was like, "Yeah, I'll help you." But he's not an encryption specialist. He's not an expert on secure communication facilities. That's not what Musk does. So I don't know why they went to him, but of course they went to him.
But the reason I bring up Musk is because he just hit the press last week. As of today recording, the 28th of March, so the Doge purge, Musk is officially classified as a special government employee, which has capped his duties at 130 days or whatever. And he has actually just announced he's stepping down and quitting Washington on Monday the 31st. But he still retains a ton of influence, and I don't know if he's actually going to. He says a lot of things he doesn't mean.
And there's a difference between stepping down and no longer being in power.
Yeah, and they were exactly. And there was already examples of during various lawsuits where the Trump administration said, "Oh, Musk has no power. He's only advisory. He doesn't head anything." And then other times they've appointed to Musk as being he's in charge. Yeah, run all your decisions past him. And then you also had Trump in cabinet meetings saying, no, actually, department chiefs make all firing decisions. The more important thing to focus on is that it doesn't matter if Musk steps down. He's done what he needs to do. He's cut,
the destruction.
The destruction's done, and he's removing barriers between him and achieving a personal. There are companies that have $1 trillion in market cap, but those are companies. I think he is trying to erode the barriers between him and personal wealth of $1 trillion to be the first trillionaire. He's already the most wealthy person on the planet. I think ultimately the legacy of institutions is what you build. And I think they're going to be remembered for doing incredible destruction, but I think that ultimately is not going to be a legacy they will think they will be as proud of as I think they'll be.
I sure damn hope not. I certainly wouldn't be proud of it if I were them.
And like, and I know he's not actually trying to make government better. So, for example, Social Security. Do you know
that whole hullabaloo?
what percentage of the Social Security Administration goes to administrative costs, like the management of all of Social Security?
I would guess I'm thinking reasonably anywhere between 10 and 20% to run the department.
Yeah, to run all, not just the department, all of Social Security.
Oh, okay, never
Is that
mind. That's like 30% would be reasonable.
Is that your final answer?
Minimum.
It started, and then like when it was established, to run all of Social Security, like administratively at the federal government, it costs it started at 2.4%.
Really?
Of Social Security's costs
Oh.
go to like running the program.
Just the tiniest little bit back then.
Started. Now, guess what it is now?
Now it's going to be like 50%.
Now it's 0.5%.
Oh, really? It's gone down.
It's gone down amazingly.
Wow.
No,
that's a huge deal.
There actually have been Social Security directors like through the 80s, 90s, and 2000s who were like, hey, this number actually needs to come up a little bit. We need more service centers.
I would believe that.
Yeah, but Social Security, I'm such a fan of it because it is closed.
Yes.
It is a completely closed system. It requires zero tax dollars to run because it's a pay-as-you-go system. Like people don't understand that when I pay my payroll taxes to go to Social Security, it does not like go into a pot of money that's in my name. It goes straight out the door that same month to a senior somewhere else in the country, right? And what this means is Social Security cannot go bankrupt. The benefits can be reduced because there aren't enough young people. That's true.
Yes.
But it cannot go bankrupt, right? And at the same time, it is extraordinarily efficient because all it does is it just passes money. Yeah, it just passes money back and forth. Now, there is a Social Security, like there were some reforms. And so there was a huge like surplus of people paying into Social Security and Social Security not paying it out. And so that's what people are referencing when they say Social Security is going to, quote, run out of money. Social Security cannot, quote, run out of money.
Because there's people paying into it.
There's people pay. As long as people exist in this country, something of Social Security will be around, right? So again, that's not saying that like Social Security won't, like the benefits won't be reduced by the time we're claiming it, but it will exist unless the administration is broken and then it's privatized. And so what a whole bunch of private interests in this country want to do is they want to take the enormous pot of money that is Social Security and gamble with it and make investments with it and privatize its administration, right? So that they can make money off of this service that's already extraordinarily efficient. And despite that context, that 0.5%, 99.5% of the thing goes straight back to the American people. Trump and Musk are attacking the Social Security Administration.
Wow.
And stuff like that is why I know it's not really an efficiency thing.
Key, beautifully put.
And because like, it's so clever that they named it the Department of Government Efficiency.
Very clever.
Because who could be against government efficiency?
Yes, absolutely. And it's a principle that we can all get behind easily.
But what I always tell, like my bachelor's degree is in economics, and one of my economics professors, and I also have an MBA, and so I took more economics courses because of that, unfortunately. One of my professors at graduate school said that just the market is is genuinely the most efficient distributor of scarce resources that we know of, right?
Okay.
It truly is. However, some things shouldn't be perfectly efficient. So what do I mean by that? Like, you know what would be a perfectly efficient healthcare system? A perfectly mathematically efficient healthcare system would be an insurance plan where once you get sick, you get kicked off. That's efficient. That would be a perfectly efficient resource allocation.
Shit.
But you would say that's not accomplishing the goal.
No.
And so that's the point I use when I say there are some things that should be well run.
Yeah.
But perfect efficiency
does not equal better.
Exactly. Right. And so most people they look at that and they're like, well, how could I be against efficiency?
Yeah.
And it's because careful, man, the government really should be in charge of some things. I think the government's role should be to establish fairness and to enforce a level playing field. Right. That's what I think government should do. And that's why I'm so against these Elon cuts because they're only cutting. I think there was a graph that came out recently where they're only statistically most of the grants and funding cut are going to, on average, are mostly being cut from counties that voted for Harris on average. Whether or not that's intentional or because like a lot of funding goes to cities and cities tend to vote for Harris, there may be some crossover there.
Interesting.
But it's not proportional. Like the Department of Defense are having a fraction by percentage of the amount of stuff cut. Defense contractors are not being cut. The Pentagon still hasn't been subjected to an audit. Doge does not have any auditing staff. There are no accountants in Doge as far as we know. It's just a bunch of tech bros running around. And if there's no auditors, there is no audit.
And then we don't know what's going on. And we don't know if it's efficient or if it's increasing efficiency.
And it's all in secret. There's no transparency, and apparently all communications are going through private.
And all communications are being deleted within a couple weeks.
So it is our ability to assess its competency is questioned. We are unable to authenticate anything that they're doing, and it's being run by political partisans in like the most aggressive way I've ever seen.
Aggressive for sure.
And all the government watchdogs and like inspector generals who are responsible for managing waste. They were all fired or attempted to be fired. I think some of them are actually being reinstated because of court order right now.
Good.
But I think they're making their way through the judicial system. Yeah. I don't know. It's a bad faith attack. I think it's laughable that people are saying that Elon is in it for anything but himself. I want the government to be efficient, and in my personal politics, I want it to be much smaller. I don't think the government, not speaking for Lindsey here, I don't think the government is responsible enough to run a national healthcare system, at least not in our current political climate. But I also really don't like the current state of affairs. I think it helps no one. And so I'm very much against the Trump administration, but only because it's not achieving my goals either.
And for me, the biggest, most important point is the complete and utter lack of fairness and truth.
Our relationship with truth is being eroded as a society.
And that's I think what really eats at my heart the most and my anger. So I want to round it out back a little here, back to the legal fallout of the Signalgate.
Go ahead.
What's going to happen next? I hope that lawsuit continues. I hope that we see more lawsuits about this. But chances are the U.S. Attorney General is not going to investigate. But the problems, there's a few specific, I want to get into like why this is not okay in a very, very concrete way. So there's first, Signal is not approved by the U.S. government for communication of classified information. So, boom, right off of the bat, there's one issue right there. And then the fact that they were using Signal implies that they were out and about in the world when they were having these communications, which means that your phone is just on you in your pocket when you're receiving messages about when bombs are going to drop.
Connected to potentially compromised networks.
Yes. Who knows what Wi-Fi network you're connecting to, and your messages are visible from Wi-Fi networks sometimes.
Wasn't one of the Trump officials when the group chat was created, weren't they allegedly in Moscow? Like visiting on state business or something like that.
That sounds familiar. That sounds very familiar.
But it's to that exact point. It's like even if that's not true, the fact that you could be connected to your home Wi-Fi and your home Wi-Fi could have a virus that's tracking all of its network and you'd never know. It could be intercepted easily, or just your device directly. There are very much a malicious malware for iPhones. Do not let Apple's propaganda fool you. They are computers, and as long as they are computers, they can be compromised.
Yes, and anything that is connected to the internet can be compromised via the internet.
Yep. And
so Jeffrey Goldberg, the journalist, behind all of this, he also suspects that Michael Waltz, the person who created this group chat, he suspects that by creating it, Waltz probably violated the Espionage Act, which is a whole other beast other than the Federal Regulations Act. And then there's the question of he added a journalist to a secure line of communication without someone with no security clearance. And so now you're exposing someone without security clearance to security information. What sort of violations of the law does that look like? I'm not exactly sure, but it's certainly a problem. I wanted to highlight here. Jason R. Barron, professor at University of Maryland, former director of litigation at the National Archives and Records Administration, so
All
he
right.
used to be a part of this body,
Yep.
told Goldberg specifically and his reporters that, quote, all government employees are prohibited from using electronic messaging applications such as Signal for official business unless those messages are promptly forwarded or copied to an official government account, and that intentional violations of these requirements are a basis for disciplinary action. They're a basis for disciplinary action. So these people have got to be disciplined. That's what really gets my goat about this whole damn thing, is that they're just, seems like they're just going to get away with it. But if this was, as you were saying at the beginning, if this was anybody else, boom, straight to jail.
Straight to jail.
Straight to jail.
Quick walk to jail.
Yeah.
Right off the plank.
But since these people are high-ranking government officials connected with Trump, that's not going to happen to them.
Yep.
So I just wanted to go say those things specifically to highlight the little bits and pieces that you might not think of. The Espionage Act, who would think of that? Well, Michael Waltz clearly did not think of that.
Well, Michael also, or not Michael Waltz, the Atlantic reached out to the DOD, the CIA,
Yes. Yes.
FBI, and the Department of the DOD before publishing these, and was like,
it was after the story came out, but before they published the full screenshots.
yeah, it was right after Tulsi Gabbard had said, "Oh, there's no sensitive information," and so he reached out and he said, "Hey, you okay with us publishing this?" And the White House and other officials were like, "Well, I wish you wouldn't."
Yeah, we're like, well, no, but
But it was pretty obvious that at that point the Trump administration was like, "Oh shit, we have to act like this isn't a big deal," because if we try and they were caught in a catch-22.
Yeah,
because they were like, well, if we make a big deal about this and swing our dick around about national security, then like we have to act like this is nothing.
yes,
Because if we don't act like it's nothing,
then our whole mirage has fallen out from under us.
Exactly. So I don't know. I think I'm. Again, these days I'm very short on specific calls to action. I think we'll just have to keep an eye on this situation.
Yeah, just keep talking about it.
Watch how it's unfolding.
Mhm.
Hopefully someone will, resign for it, maybe.
Yeah.
But I think the only chance of that happening is if there's like a real need for a political scapegoat.
Mm.
And Trump is very, very good at redirecting the narrative. So I don't know if that will
That's
happen.
For sure. The very final thing that I want to add on to this story here. I read an article from Politico. They kept this person anonymous,
All right.
but someone very close to the White House said, everyone in the White House can agree on one thing. Mike Waltz is a fucking idiot.
Well, it's so funny how much of the Trump administration clearly does not like each other.
Yeah.
Personally.
Clearly. They're like fighting. They're butting heads. And ooh, such a massive mess. I'm sure, I can tell you, no one is having fun.
Yes.
No one is having fun anymore.
In one way or another, God forbid a white guy catch a vibe, honestly.
Oh,
and just release national security secrets over Signal.
What a vibe.
Yeah, exactly, right. Anyways, that's our show for the week. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. The support for the show comes from Hemmat Law. Whether you need a fantastic attorney or want to join a fantastic team, go to hemmatlaw.com/GWP. Also, find us at gossipwithoutprejudice.com. Go to share your stories, thoughts, feedback. We'd love to hear your comments, concerns, and questions, hopes, dreams, and fears.
Very much so.
Support as little as a pledge of $5 a month. I don't know why I'm having so much trouble with this outro today.
It's because we're all hyped up about
we're also
Signalgate.
hyped up on national secrets we shouldn't have.
Seriously.
A pledge as little as $5 a month can keep the lights on, and it would be a personal favor to me and Lindsey if you could share this show with one person you think would like it. We really want to keep doing this work because it's becoming more and more apparent that it's more and more important.
Yes.
And if you need anything else from us, we would love to hear from you. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for joining. You will hear from us very soon.
Yes. Thank you so much. Bye.